We are on 48A3, otherwise known as Mem Ches Amud Aleph, towards the bottom, and we are analyzing the last lines of the Mishnah. The Mishnah told us that Rav Shimon said that if there are three chatzeros, you have three courtyards, we're going to call them A, B, and C. Okay, and the two outer chatzeros go ahead and make they make an Eruv chatzeros with the middle one. Then they could all, A and B and C could interact with one another. They could carry things from A to B, B to A, B to C, C to B. But A and C, the outer ones, right? A, B, C, you with me? A and C, they cannot interact with one another. Ask the Marvamai, why is it so? Once the outer ones join together with an Eruv in the middle one, since A and C join together with B, why is it different than any other Eruv, right? In other words, in our city, in Baltimore, for those of you in Baltimore, what happens, there's one Eruv, there's one place where we all join together, and that allows everyone to travel together. So you have A, B, and C. C and A both place food in B, in the middle one. So why are you telling me that only A is allowed to interact with B and B is allowed to interact with C? Why can't A and C interact with one another since they all have shared food? So Rabbi Yehuda, so we're going to see two answers. Rabbi Yehuda answers, we assumed that A and C put food in B. But we say no, it's actually the opposite. B put food in C, and B put food in A. And what that does is, what that makes it is that they don't have common food. In other words, we're assuming that C and A both put food in the middle, and therefore there's common food in the middle. But we're saying no, that's not what actually happened. B went ahead and put food in C, B went ahead and put food in A, and that's why B could interact with C, and B could interact with A. But you're right, and that's why A and C can't interact because they don't have any shared food. Had C and A both put food in B, then they would be able to interact with one another. That's answer number one. Even if you want to say that C and A both put food in the middle courtyard. However, they put it b'shnei batim in two different homes. In two different homes in the courtyard, right? A courtyard is made up of a bunch of homes. They put it in two different homes. And since their Eruvin, are in two different homes, they don't actually combine together as one. Ask the Gemara, wait a second, come on. That answer of Sheshes goes like who? Kivei Shammai. Only goes like Beis Shammai, right? We never want to be ruling like, you never want to take the view of Beis Shammai because machlokas between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, the halacha is like Beis Hillel. So what is he referring to? The time is talking about Brisa. Let's say you have 5 residents of one chatzar who collected bread from each other to make their Eruv, right? Back in the day, let's keep in mind, nowadays we have an Eruv chatzar which is made and it lasts for years, right? You take a box of matzah and it's there, it's good to go. Back in the day, there'd be a weekly collection of food, right? They don't want to leave food around and waste the food. They're a weekly collection of food and they leave it in one person's house. So they go around, they collect their Eruv, right? So you have 5 people and they place it in 2 separate utensils. One home, separate utensils. Beis Shammai omim ein Eruvin Eruv. That's not a valid Eruv because an Eruv is Arv, comes from the word that we're together, right? And they're not together. The 2 separate boxes, it's not together. Beis Hillel omrim Eruvin Eruv, that is a valid Eruv. Okay, so you see very clearly Rav Shesh's answer is, you know why C and A can't work together? Because they put their Eruvin in separate homes. And so they put in separate homes, therefore C and A don't have a common ground. So C and B and A, they have commonality, but the C and A are in separate, since they're in separate homes, they're not really together, and that's why C and A can't act together. Now, the Gemara says, but that only goes like Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai is the one who says if it's 2 separate boxes, then it's no good. Beis Hillel says that would be good. So Gemara says, no, I feel it him, Beis Hillel, if you want to say it's Beis Hillel, ad kan lam karm Beis Hillel hasam, al b'shnei kelim v'ais achad, al b'shnei batim lo. Beis Hillel only said his halacha when it's two utensils. When did Beis Hillel say that if it's 2 boxes still combines as one? That's when it's 2 boxes in one home. Here we're talking about 2 homes in one courtyard. That's already too far. In other words, Beis Hillel says, okay, 2 boxes side by side, that's still together. We still see that as one thing together. But when it's two homes, how can we see those together? And therefore, even Beis Hillel would agree. But now the Gemara asks a question on both Rav Yehuda's answer and Rav Shesh's answer. Amle Ravacha Bereid Rav Avia Rav Ashi. Rav Yehuda Kasha, Rav Shesh's Kasha. A question according to both of them. The Rav Yehuda Kasha. According to Rav Yehuda, there's a question. To Amar, what did he say? He said, right? Rav Yehuda said that Rav Shimon says that we're talking about a case where the middle chatzar placed, the people in B go ahead and place food in A and place food in C, right? So he asked, understand, once B, the middle guys, go ahead and make an Eruv with A, right? So once that happens, they become one unit. In other words, what is the concept of an Eruv? The concept of an Eruv is we become one group. So once B goes ahead and places the Eruv in A, right? Now AB becomes one entity. And then when B goes ahead and places an Eruv in C, Shlichus avda. He's actually acting as an agent now for A, because there's no more, once B makes the Eruv with A, right? We're assuming they're doing the Eruv one after another. So, it's Erev Shabbos, Friday afternoon. B goes ahead and takes a box of matzah and puts in A, and they combine to become one. So now they're A and B. So when B goes ahead and takes another box of matzah and puts in C, they're actually one unit. So why does Rabbi Yehuda say that A and C, right? Rav Shimon said in the Mishnah, A and C cannot interact. And the way Rabbi Yehuda understood this is that why? Because B placed one thing in C and one thing in A. But he said, don't understand. Once he puts it in, let's say it differently, B puts something in A and then puts something in C. Once he puts it in A, they become AB. They become one unit. And therefore when the people in B go ahead and make a Erev Chatzeros in C, it's just AB and now ABC because they're all to one thing. And therefore, why did you tell me that A and C can't interact with one another? Well, Rav Shesh's kasha, according to Rav Shesh, is also a question. Why? Okay, so we know there's a halacha that if you have 5 people in a courtyard and one person forgets to make an eruv, the whole eruv is invalid. Why? Because you need to have, the whole area has to be a partnership. So if, let's say, again, every Erev Shabbos back in the day, I believe, what was going on is someone would go around, they'd send one of the kids around, go pick up an Erev from every person, and then one person would acquire it on behalf of everyone, and then they would make their Erev. So the question is that so what you see over here is, let's say one person forgot to get involved. They were in the shower, they didn't come to the door, Shabbos starts, and the kid's like, oh, whoops, I forgot to pick up from Bob. Okay, now we're in trouble, right? So what happens is the whole Erev is out because it's all or nothing. Either everyone is joined together, you can't have only partial because it's all shared space. So either you all combine to become one entity or not. So here too, according to Rav Shesh's answer, what did Rav Shesh's answer? What Rav Shesh said that A put it in one house in B, C put it in one house in B, and that's the case. So B and C could act together, A and B could act together, but they can't act all together. He says, no, everyone should be forbidden because it's all or nothing. When you created one entity, you have to all be together. And if you're not all together, it's no good. The whole air is out. So Amud Rashi says, Lola Rav Yehuda kasha, Lola Rav Shesh kasha. Not a question according to either one of them. Why? Rav Yehuda lo kasha. According to Rav Yehuda, there's no question. Came under Erva lo and says Bahari Chitzona. Shem Chitzona Radadi lo Ervu Galia Daite Devaha Nichale Vaha Nelo Nichale. Rav Yehuda says, according to Rav Yehuda, it's not a problem because it's true. I hear what you're saying, Rav Ashi says. If A would go ahead and make a partnership with B, then theoretically it's B and A. And then when B goes and makes the partnership with C, it should be just A, B, C. They're all partners together. But it's not true. Because over here, the fact that B made the partnerships with A and B made the partnership with C, it demonstrates that A and C really don't want to be a part of this. In other words, when, the fact that they did not go ahead and combine all together, it makes it, when we said before, A and B is acting and B is acting on behalf of A and B and they're making partnership with C. That's only true when there's we have no information. But over here, A and C, for some reason, deliberately are not going ahead and partnering. So you can't override that. You can't say, oh, well, they're all partners. They're not all partners. Look, if they really want to be partners, then C and A, everyone should just be partners together. The fact that they didn't do this, the fact that B had to be the one handling, running around, that demonstrates they're not actually partners. And therefore, like Rav Shimon said, B and A and B and C can interact, but A and C can't interact because A and C demonstrated they really don't want to be a part of this. So Rav Shesh's lo kasha, according to Rav Shesh, no question. Why? Im amru diyar lahakil, yom diyar lahachmir. He says, what's going on here? We have a concept that, Eruv Chatzeros really is about, we have one courtyard and everyone joins together puts their food together. Now we can treat it as one entity. And then Chazal came along and they said, listen, let's say you have 2 courtyards side by side. You want to be able to go to the next courtyard. Oh, I have an idea. We're not really partners. What do? We're not really one place. Take some food from courtyard A, give it to courtyard B, and now we're going to be combined together. And so that is a leniency. It's meant to be a leniency so people could travel from one place to another. So the rabbi said you're allowed to put food in another place in order to allow you to travel to the next place. So that is this whole notion of putting some food in courtyard number 2 is a leniency. So over here you're going to tell me, the question of Sheshes was, since their foods from A and C are different food piles, it should make everyone forbidden. It's not really, because they are combined together over here. Really, C and B and C, A and B and C are all combined together. This whole notion of putting a food over is a leniency. So you can't create a stringency based on that leniency. And therefore, Rav Ashi says there's no question on Yehuda, no question on Rav Sheshas. Now, we have machlokas about what did Rav Shimon actually hold. Again, Rav Shimon's clearly saying that there's some relationship between B and C and A and B. Okay, well, let's understand what that relationship is. We'll see 2 opinions. The statement being in the Mishnah is Rav Shimon. The sages, Chazal, the Chum disagree, and they say Rishus Achas Mishameshes L'Shtei Rishus, Avalo Shtei Rishus Mishamshos L'Rishus Achas. They say no. Whereas Rav Shimon said that A and B and C they could all work, A and B and C, they could all act together. But the Chum say no. One domain could be used the residence of two other domains. In other words, A and C could both work with B because they have one space that they're using it. However, but two domains may not be used by the residents of one domain. In other words, the people in B, you can't have a box of matzah in A and a box of matzah in C, and now you have two further residents? No. It's one thing we're going to say, okay, you have one extension, you have one more residence, and therefore for A to put their food, when they put their food in, they combine together with B, so A is allowed to interact with B. And C put their food with B, so they're allowed to act with B. But B, who combined food with both A and C, you can't have two residents. Doesn't make any sense. I mean, it's almost like similar to Erev Tchumen, where you can only go in one direction. You can't put an Erev over here and Erev over here. Well, I'm going to go in both. I have two residents. No, you have one residence, right? So the Chachamim said, yes, it's true that A could interact with B and C could interact with B, but B can interact with A or with C. However, when this was said in front of Shmuel, Amrli, he said to me, Avzo Dever Rav Shimon. He says, no, that view is actually the view of Rav Shimon. Rav Shimon actually never let the people of B to interact with A or with C. Rather, all he was saying is the people in A and the people in C can interact with B. So what do the Chachamim hold? We know the Chachamim disagree. The Chachamim shlashtan asuros. All three courtyards are forbidden. In other words, the Chachamim hold that once you don't have a bilateral relationship, once it's only in one direction, that actually ruins everything, and you can't go in any direction. So, Tani Kvasar Yehuda, I'll leave it to Shmuel, and we have a brisa which supports the second view. Amar Rav Shimon said, Lamad Davar Doma, again, paraphrasing our Mishnah, parallel to our Mishnah, L'shalosh Chateros B'suchos Elazot, to three courtyards which are open one to another, B'suchos which is round, open to the public domain. Everstein says, if the two outer ones joined in area the middle, Chatzar Zomi via Mitoch Beis of Achelas. The residents of this outer one, A, could bring food from his house into B and eat there. And the residents from C could bring food into courtyard B and eat there. And the people of B or C, when they finish eating, could bring it back to their respective places, A or C. Right? But the people of B were never allowed to take their stuff and bring it to A and C. Right? This goes exactly like Shmuel, who said that that was the view of Rav Shimon. Right? In other words, according to Rav, people in the middle are allowed to bring things to those two sides, but that is not what's being said over here. The Chacham say all three are forbidden, which again, this supports the view of Shmuel. Okay, we'll pick up, God willing, tomorrow. Have a great day.